All right. Hey everyone. Let me just lower the music just a little bit. Yeah, there we go. How's everyone doing? Welcome back to this weekly edition of our AMA. AMA Sunday. Got a couple of questions from the community that we'll be digging into just in a bit. Let me just make sure that we posted everything on Twitter as well. Gotta reach out. Oh, forgot about that. What's happening here? It's also the first time that I'm trying this Nightbot thingy out. It was pretty interesting because it already started blocking my music app. Just sharing some stuff on other social media too. Bam bam bam. Yeah, I fixed it. So I think it was just like spam blocking because it was posting too much in like a short time span. Oh yeah, that's the thing that I did yesterday too, because I just got annoyed by all the messages of like, hey, this is the music that's playing now. Hey, Naru Kennedy, thanks for joining. What the hell's happening here? Hold on. Okay, that's better. I think we're good now. Awesome. Everything's posted. Should really automate that at some point. Let's dive into some questions then, right? I double checked the anonymous questionnaire. There's nothing in there for this week. There's like a couple of questions from the community itself. So it might be a really short edition. Who knows? Let's dive into the first one though. So the first one is from Leon K. And this is something that I plucked from the chat, just at random, I think. Because we had a conversation about distractions and just getting distracted while working, right? So there was like a question posed from, did you do anything specific during your student days to combat distractions? Or was that never a problem for you? It's a really good question. Because I did get distracted a lot though. Like there's not the, I'm not gonna lie about that. Like everyone gets distracted because I was never like this pristine student, right? Like just nailing everything. I was always like the more mediocre student. But let me think back, right? I think what really helped me was just the tight deadlines. And oh, the music bot is still popping up in the chat. No. But yeah, I think the tight deadlines with school and just like the intensity of school itself really helped, where there wasn't really time to get distracted or do something else. I mean, there was some free time, of course, like we could play games from time to time and make time for that. But I think it's just like really tight deadlines, like lots of stuff to do and like always being busy that really kept me from getting distracted too much. Anything specific? So let's see, right? Because I'm a big proponent of just working every day. And just starting out like small, right? Starting out with like half an hour a day and building up that habit of you working every day. I think I talked about this in the last AMA as well. Hey, Sniper Echo. Doing good. How are you doing? So, yeah, I think... I'm just thinking back, right? I think, yeah, just working every day and just building up that habit is definitely a big one. And I'm also super conscious about playing games, or like if I know that I'm gonna get into a game, I'll actually limit myself in playtime, and I'll always do it after work. So what my day normally looks like, right, is we have just a normal working day. Then I do, well, I have a little bit of a break. Like we eat, we watch like one Netflix episode, like one Netflix show. That takes up like an hour while we're eating to have like a little bit of downtime. Then I take a shower, which is like it sounds so silly, but it's like a really important part of my routine where it just completely refreshes me. And then I do a couple of hours of work again. And then after that, I'll usually play like one hour of a game, and I'll go to sleep between like 12 and 1 to get up at 9 again. So I still get like solid 8 hours of sleep, something more, sometimes more or less, right? It depends on the day. Oh, thanks for the Prime subscription there, Kennedy. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It's just like working to that routine and like trying to build that routine in a consistent way. Because it's not about like high intensity output. You got to see it as a marathon instead of a sprint. You're doing this for the long haul. You're not doing this to like in a burst and then just stopping it. So I would say choose the things that you spend your time on consciously. Like really think about like, what am I gaining from, I don't know, for an example, like binging like 5 episodes of this this Netflix show, for example, where it could completely like reset your mental what would you call it, like mental capacity with just one episode. Like that could be enough, and then the rest is just like overconsumption. You could see it in the same way as I don't know, eating sweets, or like eating something that just makes you feel good. You can overconsume on that, and I think the same applies to games and Netflix series and TV shows and whatever. It applies to those as well. But I do want to say that's not something that just happened, right? That's not something that just happened from the get-go. It took me a long while to realize that and to work on it consistently and to improve it. It was all like small incremental steps to get to a place where I'm at now. And that is not to say that I'm not doing improvements anymore, but I'm still doing those small incremental tweaks and like trying stuff out. And then the thing that I'm doing now, for instance, is I'm really getting into Valhalla. And then I'll give myself that playtime, but always after I do everything else. So I always use it as like a treat for myself instead of as something else. But this is always a tricky thing, right? Because I think this works really well for me, but it might not work for you. So where it is something that you have to experiment with for yourself. Oh, Shakamura 3D. Thanks for the follow. Welcome to the Beyond Extinct community. Well, on Twitch, but Yeah, I mean, we had this conversation on our community Discord as well, right? Where some people were bringing up the really good suggestion of doing physical exercise as well to have like this mental reset. That is definitely like a good thing to do as well. Because yeah, sometimes you get distracted because you're just tired of something. Like you've been working on something for like 8 hours, so to say. Like you need a bit of a break before you get back into it. So give yourself that break. It's a really good question, Leon. Thanks for all these awesome questions. Oh, we're getting some questions in the chat as well. Awesome. Let's see if they're relevant to this topic, right? But on a big environment, when do you decide that you're done for the day and have time to play games? So what I'll do there is I have like, well, let's have a look, right? I have like a bunch of post-it notes here. Ones can I show? I have like a bunch of post-it notes. This is for the challenge. I have some on my monitor as well. And I always have this on hand. And this is like, I build a plan for the day, and I usually do that the day before, where it's like, okay, tomorrow, what do I want to achieve? So let's think of an example. Like yesterday, that was getting modular assets done for my foliage, for my ivy pieces. And then once I achieved that, it was like, okay, now I'm free to either continue working or to play some games. It's all about, with bigger environments, it's about chopping them up in like smaller deadlines. And it's something that in the beginning, you're gonna probably set the bar way too high, but it's all about like smaller bricks to build a house. So think about chopping it up in like smaller things. And I highly recommend getting post-it notes or like a little notebook. Like if you, I have this one here actually. So this is like a little notebook, and I filled it up with like notes for every day. So like every day has like tons of notes, like small annotations, stuff that I need to do. So I would literally note everything down, make like a list per day, and then just go through them. And if I don't get through that list, I would just move it to the next day. Because sometimes you get to a point where, I mean, you're just done for the day. Like even if you haven't finished all your tasks, like sometimes it's just like, okay, I know that I might be just spinning in circles. Let's just call it enough for today and just do the rest tomorrow. Because oftentimes also what happens is that if you're refreshed and you have like your new set of eyes on the problem, you're gonna see new solutions as well. Especially when you're working late at night, you might be thinking about an issue for like 2 hours and then fix it in 5 minutes the next day, for example. So would you not play games at all until all the environment work is done? Oh no, I play games in between as well. You need something to like reset your mind, right? You need something at the end of the day to just be like, okay, I did good today. I made good progress, and then just play a game or do something else that relaxes you. Because sometimes I don't play games and I just sit in, well, that's usually during the summer. I would just sit outside for an hour, just on the balcony or something, just chilling out a little bit. Good questions though. Yeah, if you're new to the stream, oh, see, Nightbot is picking it up as well. So if you're new to the stream, feel free to drop any questions down in the chat, right? And I'll see if I can answer them to the best of my abilities. Because we're gonna go through 2 more questions from the community, and then I'm gonna dive into the chat questions. So the next one is from Ioana Oprisan. I think I pronounced that right. I think I completely butchered it last time. I forgot the A in the beginning, so sorry about that. And if it's not correct, please just type it in the community chat. Just correct me. I've got one about unwrapping, and I think it applies to every modeling software. How often do you use box unwrap via manually marking seams? And how do you unwrap chamfered edges? That's a really good question. Hey, Boggle the Hoggle, thanks for the follow, man. It's good to see you in here too. Part of my inspiration to start streaming. So yeah, let's go back to unwrapping, right? How many times do I use box unwrap? Let's think. Because I'm using Blender now, right? Everything is hinging on how you select your seams for the unwrap. So I would say that I barely use a box unwrap. Yeah, because the automatic unwrap in Blender is actually pretty good. And then, well, you got the automatic unwrap, and then you also, got the normal unwrap that you use. But that's where it detects the seams, and then it just flattens the rest out. So that's the thing that I use the most, actually. So I'm really careful where I set my seams. And then I just do like an automatic unwrap. And sometimes I have to clean it up a little bit, yeah. But for the stuff that I'm doing, which is mostly non-technical, right? It's not that big of an issue. Like I don't really use box unwrap or anything like that. Because yeah, if I'm honest, like for the environment artwork that I'm doing, it's all pretty straightforward and simple. How do you unwrap chamfered edges? That's a very good question, because that depends on how you're gonna bake it, or because normally the rule is like if it's close, if the angle of two polys, like if you have two polys that are like at a 90-degree angle, that's usually when you would introduce like a hard seam, and you would separate them in the UVs as well, so you would have separate UV islands. But with a chamfered edge, it would be good to let's think back when I did the last bacon chamfered edges. I think it's good to keep them as one as much as possible, because it has like intermediate information within that chamfer to bake the high poly onto. It does depend a little bit on the shape that you're baking down, right? But I would like the overall thing with unwrapping is that you want to hide the seams as much as possible. So if you have, I don't know, let's say for example a simple chamfered box, right? The way that you would do the seams is you would try to minimize the seams on top of the box. So you would hide, or you would try to minimize the seams on top of the box, and then try to hide them underneath the box. So you would probably cut out the bottom chamfer, and then probably have like a line going up, like on the edges. How would you do it? Let's think, right? Because it gets tricky, because you're gonna get seams anyway with this object. Oh, actually, I thought about, so if you have this cube, you separate the top and the bottom, where you have like one seam at the top, one seam at the bottom, and then one seam down the vertical. Then you have like the complete unwrap for the sides, one top and one bottom. I think that might be the best one. I always set the seam in the middle of the chamfer. Well, when I'm thinking about a chamfer, I'm thinking about like just a really simple like 2 edges, not like more, because if you're baking down information, usually you don't need more than that. Well, it depends on the size and some other stuff, of course, but if you're talking about like small chamfers, usually won't need more than that. But that's the thing. Like sometimes if you put the seam in the middle of the chamfer, that might be totally relevant too, because that might be the best option in that situation. But normally you would try to hide them as much as possible. Francis CK _, thanks for the follow. Welcome to the Beyond Extinct community. Let's see, right? Because there's some boggle the hoggle. The baking is more inaccurate if you split the seam at the chamfer, right? It has to do with how you split the seams. So it's not going to be more inaccurate, but it's how you split those seams off. I gotta admit that I'm not the best one to talk to about this, but I'll do my best to explain, right? So the baking is gonna introduce some small seams. Where, let me think, right? So if you're splitting them, because as soon as you split them, you basically need to make it a hard edge, and you need to split the UV islands. That's always the core rule. So it's gonna look a bit different. It's gonna affect the normal information, because if you split like an edge, it's gonna basically split the vertex information in two. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good explanation, but I don't think. Yeah, if you want to call it inaccurate, I think that's a fair statement. Oh man, I should get back into modeling some more complex stuff again. Yeah, some good questions though. Keep them coming, so that I can, especially about baking, just struggle my way through. Just realize how long it's been since I did like a completely accurate bake. Most of the stuff is so super simple that I'm doing these days. Last question from Leon though. Leon K. So, can you talk a bit about artists in general and your experiences with them? When you apply at a studio, at what point in the process would the artist be? Is there always an artist? What's the usual time frame? Is it expected that the artist meets the quality level of your portfolio pieces? Okay, so let's split this up a bit, right? So, can you talk about artists in general and your experiences with them? So, let's have a look, right? How many artists have I done? I don't even know if I can name the studios. Should probably be a little bit careful with that. I can well, it's not under NDA or something. So let's just count them, right? So I didn't do an artist for Frontier, because that was part of my internship. And I also didn't do an artist for this position that I am in now. But I did do artists for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6 other positions in like the 2 years before I joined Ubisoft Berlin. Yeah, I think I did around like 5 or 6, I think. My experience with them is that it's kind of tricky, right? Because I know why they do them, because sometimes they need to just make 100% sure that the stuff that's on your portfolio is actually the stuff that you can reach in like a relatively what would you call it, like production aligned timeline, let's call it that. But I don't know, they're always so stressful, and I never really feel like in my case that they really showed what I was really good at, because my strength is not really in modeling stuff myself, or like making, how would I say this, like not modeling stuff myself, But it's more about the fundamentals. It's more about the composition. It's more about how to use colors. It's more about how to tell a story in it. It's more about that kind of stuff than about, for example, if they would give me like a modeling challenge, like a modeling artist, where you had to be really accurate with the modeling and the texturing, and it all had to look like super realistic. I probably would fail that one, honestly. Especially in the short time span, because that's not what I'm focusing on. Like I don't really focus on that on my day-to-day job, and I also don't really focus on that on my personal work either. So yeah, it's always interesting because artists are designed to test there's things that are missing from the person's portfolio, right? Like normally you would look at a person's portfolio and look at the stuff that they did, and it's like, okay, for example, this person X can really texture well. They know that they can texture 100%. Like they know how to achieve like realism with their textures too. But there is some stuff missing from the modeling aspect, so maybe we can offer them like a dedicated modeling artist, because they already know that it's like good enough for the texturing that they do anyway. I don't know. I think there's more stuff to be done with artists, because sometimes they're so generalistic in the way that they're set up that I think a lot of people that really have like a lot of potential just fall through the net in that way. It's just my opinion though. But yeah, when you apply at a studio, at what point in the process would an artist be? So normally you would get your first interview, and then you would talk through your portfolio, and you would meet the people on the other side to talk about like experiences at the studio, how it's worked for the studio. And then after that initial interview, that's probably when you would get an artist, where if they know, like I mentioned before, like if they still want to see something specifically from you, that's when they might offer you an artist and be like, okay, we're gonna give you like 1 or 2 weeks for this artist, and you can basically decide what the time frame for that is gonna be, right? It's not gonna you can tell them like, okay, I don't have time for the artist this week, but I can do next week or something. Is there always an artist? No, there's not always an artist. It depends on your portfolio and how good you can explain it, right? And it also depends on how quickly the company that you're applying to is looking for someone to fill a position. That's also like an important point, because it's not only focused on you, it's also something that the company is actually looking for. So sometimes they need like some artists like really quickly, and they're just like, okay, we don't really have time to go through the normal procedure of like going through an artist and all that stuff, and we just need someone to fill a gap in a pipeline. That can be a possibility too. And I'm not saying that was the case in any of my ones, but I think a lot of people just think about it way too much, that it's all on them, where it's also you're applying to fill a position in a company too. What's the usual time frame? So this depends, right? If we're talking about environment art, I think most of them are going to be 1 to 2 weeks. Maybe shorter than 1, but I wouldn't expect them to be shorter than 1, to be honest. I think most of them are around that. If it goes... This is where you need to be really careful though, because sometimes there are companies out there that do it longer than 2 weeks, and that's where you need to start asking questions. Because sometimes there are companies, and there have been instances where people have been sort of scammed with like lesser known companies just to get free content. So they basically would offer you an art test, and then you would be producing like a couple of props and you would be trying your best, and then they would just never reply once you send the models back to them, because it's just like a really, I mean, this is like an exception, right? It's not the rule, but there have been instances where I've heard people go through that, where they just get scammed for their time, basically. Yeah. See, every time I want to say it, Nightbot just comes to the rescue. This is awesome. So, is it expected that the artist meets the quality level of your portfolio pieces? Assuming that you probably have less time. Yeah, obviously there's less time, but they're also going to be smaller in scope. Because I do think that it needs to reach the same level as your portfolio pieces. Like, ideally, right? Obviously, you're going to be trying to push the level, but I mean, in a time frame of 2 weeks, there's only so much you can do, right? So it's not only a test of raw skill or like technical implementations, but it's also about like the bigger thinking. Like, if you were to be put in a position where you have to build something that is in your mind bigger than 2 weeks work, how do you optimize that work within those 2 weeks to still bring it to like a level of quality where it's shippable, but you made like conscious sacrifices of what you can just leave behind or like spend a minimal amount of time on. So for example, this could be, say you need to make a smaller environment. Maybe this depends, of course, on the brief itself, but maybe instead of making all the foliage yourself, you just go through Megascans and just look. You don't want to go into making foliage yourself. Just download a couple of things from Megascans. If this is big, right? If the brief allows for that, that's a really important point, because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But then if you were to push that yourself, like if you were to push like all the foliage in this example scene yourself, then it might be like a high risk, high reward kind of thing, where if it fails, it might cost you the position, but if it works, it might also like help your case. So it's about that risk versus reward thinking and like optimizing how you can build with like a really short time frame. Hey, Brussels. Yeah, all is well. How are you doing? Okay. I hope that answered the questions. These were some really good questions. And it made me realize that I might need to go back and just experiment with baking just a little bit more to offer you some better information. But I hope it helps. Oh, we're like 37 minutes in at the moment, so we only had like a couple of questions from the community, right? So now I'm gonna go through the chat questions. So yeah, just to reiterate, if you're new to the stream, feel free to drop any questions about the games industry, environment, art, or anything like that in the chat, right? And I'll go through them and see if I can help out. Sorry about that. Keep forgetting that I have a mute button set up for that. That's better. Okay, let's go through the chat. Really looking forward to the A4 page of questions. Yeah, Sniper Echo, come on. Where's like the 1,000 questions that you promised? Let's have a look. No pressure, by the way. Like if we don't get any questions, I might just switch it over to just I I might introduce like a little bit of a cut because I want to have this like a separate VOD, right? So that people can watch it back. But I might just jump into doing some work. On a big environment, when do you decide that you're done for the day? Yeah, we answered this because this was a part of our first question, right? Always put the seam in the middle. How many years have you been working at Ubisoft? So currently, what is it? Like a little bit over 2 years now. I think I started. When did I start? August or September? I think I signed my contract like the day after my birthday. Huh. So yeah, I think it's in August. So it must be like a little bit over 2 years now. And then before that, I was at Frontier Frontier Developments for 2.5 years. So we're getting up to, what is it? Almost year 6 in the industry. Time's flying. Lorenzo Howard too. Wait, yeah, thanks for the question. I just want to make sure that we haven't skipped any of the other questions first, right? So, how many years at Ubisoft? We answered that one. I think I would easily fail on artist. I'm really good at technical work. I mean, if you're really good at technical work, R&D and workflow optimization, it sounds like you're more of a technical artist anyway. Do you have any experience with the terrain level streaming in Unreal? No, I don't. Because all of the stuff that I'm doing in Unreal is just like small, well, relatively small portfolio pieces, right? So I don't have any knowledge of that. Would be interesting to dive into though, like make a giant landscape and see how you can optimize that. Would be like a fun project on the side, like really diving into the technical aspects of it. Okay, let's dive into the question, Lorenzo Howar. Hello, I just joined, so I'm sorry that if the question has been answered before. No worries. Like, I'm expecting to like reiterate some questions, so that's not a big deal. So feel free to drop any questions that you have. I want to enter the games industry. Currently, I'm making a multiplayer game with Unreal to test my skill, and I specialize in character art. How should I start? So, if it's your intention to get into the games industry, I would focus on character art. Because if you say that you specialize in character art and you're making a multiplayer game in Unreal to test your skill, like testing your skill in Unreal with like a multiplayer game is totally, I wouldn't say irrelevant though. I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's like so far from your specialization that it might not be relevant or like the quickest route to get into the industry. If you say you're specialized in character art, I would just like fully focus into character art and like really start building like cool characters that have interesting stories behind them, and maybe you can put them into like a small scene, right? Like if you find some really interesting asset packages from Unreal Engine, for example, you can combine the two where you make the characters and then post them in an environment that fits that character. But you don't want to be spending time on creating stuff in the environment yourself because you specialize in character art. So in that way, you still showcase that you can do character art. You have like an optimized low poly character that you have in Unreal, like in an environment, and maybe you can even look into like animating and rigging, because that's still relevant to character art, or that's going to help you push your characters. Whereas you're making a multiplayer game which requires a lot of coding, either blueprints, you you're doing a lot of stuff that is not really relevant to your specialization. So I would recommend just to completely focus on character art and the relevant skills to that. So animation rigging, all that stuff. It's a really good question though. I would definitely say focus a little bit more on the character art. Because I think, yeah, no worries. I think it's good, right? Like it's good that you experiment with creating like a multiplayer game, because that's something, it's super interesting as well, right? But yeah, it's just if you want to get into the industry, you just have to go all out. Character art and then implementation into the engine and the stuff that is relevant to character art, and then you're good to go. Naru Kennedy, is there always a crunch period before launching a game, or how long does it last usually on a AAA studio? No. This is a big no. There's not always a crunch period before launching a game. Let me see, right? Because I wanna be as transparent as possible, but well, the thing that I can say is that we don't have crunch in our studio. Like, they respect your time, they respect the work-life balance, and obviously there are studios that do. Like, obviously, CD Projekt Red being a big one, right? Yeah, no worries. I'll watch out for the NDA. That's not something that I'll worry about. Because it is a good question, though. I think a lot of people have to think about this. So I think when you look at CD Projekt Red, even though they stated that they won't do crunch, they have been going through crunch for like a really long time now. And you know, look, I'm not gonna say that they're like a beacon of light, because they're just crunching the shit out of their people. And it's not only CD Projekt Red, right? There's other companies that do it too. But if we're talking about how long it can last, for CD Projekt Red, it's multiple years. You're not talking months, you're talking years. At least from all the stuff that came out of it, right? Like all the articles and all the stuff that most people have read about it. So this is a big thing to keep in mind. Because yeah, it's a really good question. I think more people should be aware of this, especially if you're starting out in the industry. You don't want to be entering a company that is, well, that is just basically killing your love for the industry that you entered into. That's the biggest thing, right? Because that's what it's doing. Like, people just leave the industry after that. They're just like, no, I don't need this. I don't need this anymore. But yeah. There's also, I think there's also a difference between crunch and oh, June's 5. Hello, I'm late. No. That's all right. This is going to be uploaded as a VOD anyway, so you can watch it back. Welcome to the stream, though. So yeah, what was I saying? So there is a big difference between crunch and like trying to make the best end product, right? Because sometimes what the company does is they have overtime, which is not mandatory, by the way. It's completely negotiable. What mostly happens is that you negotiate it with your team. And then if the team thinks that the entire team, if the entire team thinks it's justified to do overtime, that's when you're allowed to do overtime. So it's not like a decision that you can make yourself to just do overtime whenever you want. It has to be like a conscious team decision where everyone knows that, okay, if they want to push the quality bar of this product, then you just get together and work on it together. It should never be just you doing like most of the work. It should never be the case. Let's have a look, right? This is such a good question. I wanna... Yeah, I wanna save this one. So, oh, hello. Hey, Raj. Thanks for the host, man. I appreciate it. I find some weird stuttering or lags when loading level streaming, even when the terrain is blank. Yeah, I have no clue how that works. Sorry, man. Sorry that I can't help you with that. Yeah, there must be some settings that you can change, right? But I have zero clue. Did you experiment with that different import option in Unreal? No, I haven't yet, but I did some more exporting, and just like the settings with the materials were so good. Do you stream some of your work? Oh, you stream character modeling. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll try. I try to be more active on Twitch, right? Because I think it's a really nice community here. So maybe if you're streaming sometime, I'll drop in. So do you remember? Okay, this is another question from Naru Kennedy. You remember I have an internship on an outsourced studio for next year? I was wondering if this happens everywhere because I read on Glassdoor a bunch of reviews saying lots of overtime. Well, oh, hey, Antonio. Welcome to the stream. Doing good, man. How are you? So, if like a bunch of reviews are saying lots of overtime, then that is a really good indication that that might be true, right? Because if it's just like the one-off where it says like, oh, lots of overtime, like I was crunching for like hours and hours, just as an example, right? Yeah, I think that's a good indication of thinking about it again. It does also depend on the state of the project too, right? So there's gonna be like project closings or like really tight deadlines at certain projects. It might be different for an outsourced studio because I think they have like shorter turnarounds. So I think it might be more intense in an outsourced studio, but I haven't worked in one myself, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I would be careful, but still, it's a foot in the door, right? So that's where the balance, or like the tricky thing to balance, begins. Like if I were to think back in my shoes, and that was like the studio, like after sending like 25 or like 50 applications out, right? And that's the only studio that replied to me, and it would say like lots of overtime. Me personally, I would just be like, okay, it might suck, but I'll just make it through, and then at least I have a foot in the door to work my way up for something else. And I think a lot of people feel that way, and I think a lot of people also go into the wrong direction with that. And I was just like super fortunate to not have it happen to me, right? I've never done mandatory overtime or anything like that. Well, see, yeah, exactly, right? I would do the same thing, but that's also a part of the problem. And this is not on you, by the way, right? I'm trying to reflect this onto myself, because I would do the exact same thing. But that's where the system relies upon this kind of stuff, where it's like CD Projekt Red, like they get massive flack for crunching the entire time, but people still want to work on Cyberpunk 2077. There's always this weird contradiction. It also depends on the location. This is going back to the crunch conversation, right? It doesn't mean crunch is not possible. Yes, exactly. 100%. I don't think it's ever going to be ruled out, because in Germany everything is regulated by law. Yeah, exactly. 100%. I think if they really wanted to, they can always like try to skirt the edges of like the gray zones of the law if they really wanted to, right? But yeah, I mean, we're in a good position though, so we haven't gone through any crunch or anything like that yet, and I don't think we will. Just for clarification. Obviously, we are speculating, but given the info out there about Unreal Engine 5, do you think that the high detail parallax occlusion mapping will no longer be necessary for the most part? I don't know. I'm not too sure what's going to happen with that, because you're talking about like just the high amount of mesh density that you can have in your scenes, right? I want to know more about the technical aspects, because they talked about like... Because the biggest concern is like the file size and like how big those files were going to be with just like such an incredible amount of detail. And I saw some hints. There might be a talk about that now, but I saw some hints about, I think, the technical director at Epic Games or like at Unreal Engine dropping some hints that they worked on like a new algorithm to like downsize the file sizes of their models and assets like drastically. But I haven't looked up anything like that yet, because what I'm currently thinking is that it will be a smaller shift in the industry, but I'm always so skeptical about this, right? Like, it looks cool because it's a marketing demo, and this is like the stuff that they push out with Unreal Engine. But then if you're thinking about it in like a realistic game aspect, where you have, for example, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where you have like NPCs running around, like everyone has their sort of own thing that they're doing in the world. There's like dynamic systems happening around. There's like dynamic day and light cycles. Like all of that stuff is... all that stuff is going to take away from all that budget that you would normally spend on like calculating those meshes and those details. So it's like, if you want to create a game, I think there's going to be sacrifices on the asset and the mesh side of things. So I don't think like parallax and all that stuff is going to go away anytime soon. And then also there's like the question of Unreal Engine versus proprietary engines as well, right? So it might be that you'll be working with some really cool tech for your portfolio pieces, where it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about like the amount of assets or like the density of the assets anymore. But then if you get to the games industry, you still have to do like the optimized workflow anyway. So then it might be better to just do the workflow anyway, because that's going to be more applicable for the games industry. Yeah, but I'm really excited. Like the dynamic GI, that's the one thing that I'm super excited for. I'm keeping my eye out once all these scalpers and bots are gone from like the 30 series from Nvidia. I might pick myself up a new graphics card and prep myself for Unreal Engine 5. Gonna be sweet. I wanna try it. Yeah, exactly. That's 100% it, right? Like Unreal Engine 5, like Epic Games is using it. A couple of other, like, what would you call it? Like AA games or like smaller indie games, they use it. But like all the bigger companies, they have their own engines that they're working on. So it's not going to be like this massive shift of the entire industry changing that a lot of people are talking about, I think. If you're using Unreal Engine, it's going to be fucking awesome, though. I'm looking forward to it. Let's have a look, right? So, Antonio is sick and tired, but nothing stops me from doing uni work. Well, you gotta balance it. Take regular walks and do some physical exercise. You gotta make it sustainable. It's not you're not crunching yourself out in uni. Well, you shouldn't be. Once I'm inside, maybe I can fight against it. Yeah, I think a lot of people think that. And I think a lot of those people just start their own companies. Because that's also what's happening with CD Projekt Red. Like a lot of senior people, they just left CD Projekt Red to start their own companies. And just be like really anti-crunch in that way. Once you have a foot in the door, it's easier to proceed and change companies. Yep. Exactly. It's all about getting that foot in the door. It's so weird, but that's the way it is. I'm thinking to switch to VFX because my uni have higher employment on the VFX industry. Well, that depends on you if you want to follow what the uni is recommending and what the higher employment is, or if you want to follow what you want to do. And if they align, if that is VFX, then go for VFX. If it's not VFX that you want to do, I wouldn't follow what the higher employment rate is. I know this is like a really how would I say it? Like it's like a really blunt statement, right? Maybe blunt is not the correct word. Because it might get you into trouble for longer, right? Like say if you can't find like a job in game art, for example, for like a long time, then you would be wishing that you were working in the VFX industry. But you have to think about it long term, where you want to work for something that you want to do, instead of the higher employment rate. I've been experimenting with parallax occlusion setup, like Star Citizen. Yeah, I did some of that stuff too. Some interesting stuff going on with Unreal Engine when it comes to that though. There was some things that are missing that you could see in Star Citizen. I think, what was it? It's been a while since I tried it. I think just the metalness setup and like how to blend decals and have more control over the decals that you're using would be interesting. To the crunch topic. Previous company in 1 year, 300 hours of overtime in 1 year, but that's one big exception. But it opened some doors for me. God damn it, man. 300 years of overtime in 1 year. That's fucking brutal. Well, it's good that you're with us, though. Doing some awesome work. Yeah, I would say that's the thing, right? It's the exception to the rule. That's what I mentioned in the beginning too, right? Like if you're looking at CD Projekt Red and some other companies, I know that I keep hammering on this one company specifically, but that's just the one that's in the forefront right now. Yeah, sometimes it's a choice, right? If you want to suffer through it and just come out at it stronger at the other end. Do you have one feature that you wish Blender had? Yeah, better UV tools. Give me better UV tools. I've been combining multiple UV add-ons at the moment, and it's always like pick and choose from one add-on. I just want one add-on that does it all. I don't know what I want in my semester. Okay. Yeah, exactly. The full deferred decal setup is kind of missing. It's what I'm missing from that setup, especially when you're trying to replicate the system that they have in Star Citizen. But if you can get some really nice results though. That's the stuff that I was trying with my latest environment that I'm no longer working on. Yeah, people, if you have any questions for me, if you want to talk about like the game industry, have some questions about personal work, environment art, how to stay motivated, maybe how to improve your personal work, just let me know, and I'll do my best to answer it. Also, better read topology tool. Yeah, maybe. I haven't done any retopology in Blender. Like all the stuff that I do is not that bad. I think I saw some cool add-ons that flip normals were showcasing like a while back for retopology. I think. I'm not too sure. Awesome. I'm trying to get a damage system like Star Citizen set up. Damn, that's awesome. The option to show a sound file waveform in the timeline. See, this is the cool thing about Blender, right? There's so many different use cases. So many different use cases, like people are using it for so many different applications that the stuff that I want for Blender is like totally opposite to what other people want for it. Better way to control edge selection for controlling bevels. Yeah, that's interesting. I get by with the weighted bevels. Gives me the control that I need. But if you're doing hard surface, it might be somewhat trickier for sure. Lorenzo Howard 2, thanks for the follow. You think that Houdini will change how the industry you think that Houdini will change how the industry, as we now see more and more people are using Houdini. Houdini is already like a big part of the industry anyway. Especially within Ubisoft, they use it for like terrain generation, like the distribution of procedural tools. Like they use Houdini for like a lot of stuff already for like a couple of years. So I think it already happened. I think people are just not really too conscious about what happened. Yeah, because like the customer facing side, or like if you're just playing the games, right, then nothing really changed. Like the trees and the bushes and all that stuff is still there. They don't look different, but like the placement of it has all been, or like mostly been done by well, most of the time artists painting like biome regions, and then based on that region it will like generate the procedural recipe. There's some good talks about that. I know that I keep bringing it up every time we do these AMAs, but there's some good talks about like the Far Cry 5 procedural generation tools. They're publicly available, so it's if you're interested in that, go check them out. Awesome. Yeah, we got a nice full chat today. So I just want to reiterate, right? Like if you have any questions about the games industry, environment, how to get into the games industry, personal work, I don't know, it can be anything. Just shoot a message in chat and we'll discuss it. Let me actually quickly have a look at some of the AMA questions. There's some people that are just angry about missing their questions on the chat. Rockstar Games can find it very useful because of the many buildings they're doing. They must use a procedural system for that too. I think it's a procedural system with like a lot of manual control. Because that's also the thing, right? Like if you're talking about like procedural systems or Houdini, you have full control about how big the percentage is procedural and how big the percentage is just hand placed or like hand altered. We have like a lot of control over that. It's so interesting though. All the procedural tech. I'm kind of curious what the next evolution is going to be. I think... Yeah, I don't know. The next evolution of procedural tools. Because procedural tools, like, there's like a lot of procedural modeling going around now, right? But I don't think it's that attractive for artists. Like, if I look at like procedural modeling in Houdini, like, that's not something that I want to do. Like, I just don't get it. Maybe this is a part of me just staying behind already in this fast changing industry. Like, there's certain aspect that really interest me, right? But there's something about like modeling stuff yourself on the screen instead of doing it in nodes on the side and just like moving nodes and connecting nodes. It's fun for a while, but it's not, I don't know, it's not that same creative spark. It doesn't touch that same creative side of me. How big is VFX work in the games industry? That's a good question. Let's have a look. It's definitely a part of it, right? But one VFX artist can achieve so much in a game. Create so many different effects. So that's also why they're more sought after, but also that they're less advertised applications. Because it's even worse than concept artists. Normally you have like a couple of concept artists on the team to do like all the concepts and do the planning and help like the content team create their work. But I think when it comes to VFX, at least in from what I can see, right? If there's like a VFX artist that's in the industry, just in the chat right now, I think the chance is small, but maybe they can shine a light on it. But so I think we had one person in our team, what we're currently working on. Can't really say too much about it, right? Because NDA. But yeah, it's definitely like a smaller part of the industry, but they're highly sought after, and to compensate, they're also well paid, because it's one of those things that's not really what should I call it, like advertising games, or like that apparent in games, or like in game schools, I should say, where there's no dedicated track for like VFX artists to go specifically in the games industry. It's more like you said, it's more like a VFX artist going into the VFX industry and then finding out that games are more interesting, and then, or maybe like switching at some point. Yeah, exactly. You get one VFX artist, you will keep them on for a very long time. Exactly. Exactly. You do such a good job though. How big is it for environment artists wanting to break into the industry to know Houdini? Is it something we'll be using if we're not technical artists? Oh yeah, just to add on to this, it is hard to find a job as a VFX artist in games, 100%. Because that's the thing, like, it's more niche. It's like Meathead Booyah said. Like, he... once you get a VFX artist in, you will try to keep them for a very long time because they're so well sought after. So you would do your best to keep them as long as possible. That's also why you don't see many open applications for them either. Hey Milan, thanks for joining, buddy. Yeah, if you want to talk about Houdini, he's the guy to talk to. Fucking dropping that sweet workflow. That was cool, man. I enjoyed that. Let's go back to the question. How important is it for environment artists wanting to break into the industry to know Houdini? Is it something we'd be using even if we're not technical artists? So here's the weird thing, right? I have no knowledge about Houdini, although I use it every day. Because I just use the outcome of Houdini. I use the outcome of the procedural system. But I don't control how it's set up. I just get like the... What would I say? I would get like the recipes that are spit out by Houdini or set up by the technical artist. And I get control with the recipes, but they control how the recipes are going to be reacting. But I wouldn't... Here's the tricky part, right? I would recommend at least getting a basic knowledge of Houdini, because it is such a really good skill to have. Like, especially if you want to go more the technical side, it's so good to have that skill. However, I don't think it's a requirement as an environment artist. Because you can still get by with just like the more non-techy side of it, where it's just more focused on the art and like the composition, the scaling, the proportions, the color usage, and then on top of that, the modeling that you have, like the workflow knowledge that you have with baking. That is still going to be the core package that you would expect. But then if you want to move towards the technical aspects, that's where you would learn about Houdini, maybe some scripting languages too, Python, that kind of stuff, to help bridge gaps between, or to help improve the workflow of the artists, because that's what you're basically moving towards then. I use procedural to augment my manual. For example, spawning objects in the world. Yep, exactly. That's like a good use case. Procedural adding damage to meshes based on thermal erosion factors. That's a little bit more advanced, but yeah, that could be like a really good use case too. Yep. Think most artists have no clue, including myself, how to use Houdini. So far from a requirement. Exactly. But having it is a huge plus for any studio. Yeah, exactly. I think also looking forward, right? I don't think Houdini for like a level artist or an environment artist is ever going to be a hard requirement, because it is more the technical side of things. So I think if you want to become like a technical artist that is focused on the world creation aspect of it, like say you wanna help, like this is your passion, you want to help to construct the worlds from a technical aspect, that's where you need Houdini, 100%. It saves me messing up and trying to sculpt damage. Well, yeah, if you have the technical skills to procedurally add damage to your meshes, then why not, right? So you have to be like the top of the top to get lucky to find a job in VFX. Well, yeah, but that also applies for environment art, right? I mean, it's kind of weird, like what would like a good analogy be? Like the gate is more wide when it comes to environment art, so more people get in. But it's only still like the top people that are getting in, or like the people that are like really good. Now thinking of it, that's not true. I think there's definitely more. Well, there's 100% more opportunity for environment artists in general than there is for VFX artists. 100%. I think you can compare it more to like a weapon artist, where a weapon artist, like if you really want to do weapons and that is your niche, you have to be the top of the top, where I think it's going to be the same thing for VFX. But as always, right, there's different factors that come into play, because it's a lot of people only focus on the skill, but it might also be the timing and your location and all that stuff too. Because you might have like a really good like just the best VFX artist or like the best weapon artist working on like the most awesome weapons, but if they don't want to move for like a in studio position, then that's not going to matter to that studio. Or maybe they're just not fun to work with. That could happen too. So skill, like the technical skill, like the raw skills, the hard skills that we call them, definitely the most important thing, but then not the end all be all. Okay, so if I really want to be a VFX for games, it has to be really hard. Yeah, I think so. Oh, you have to work really hard. Well, yeah, obviously. Hard skills show a lot of work. Yep. Show a lot of work. Definitely. Yeah, I think that applies to the games industry, right? It's such a... We were talking about it yesterday for like an episode of the podcast that we're going to be releasing in 2 weeks. But yeah, we were talking about it in the way that it's looking back at like when we went through uni, which is not that long ago. Like it's only been 6 years. Like just the amount of people out there trying to get in and how popular it is. Like it's only going to raise the bar. I mean, VFX for the movies, TV industry is equally as difficult, I feel. I don't know. Because I went to the mill in London when I was going through uni. It was like part of our trip, right? I have a few friends who do that kind of work in the industry. Well, I think your point has actually more meaning than what I'm going to say right now then, if you have friends that are actually working in the industry, because I've been out of touch with it. But from my experience, I went to one of these companies and it's just like a ton of VFX artists working in those companies. But from what I saw, right, it's just grueling work. It's just hard work. So you might have a better idea of that. I definitely don't think it's going to be easy. Like there's no easy way to get into the games or movies or TV industry, because it's built on passion, right? It's built on how you can combine your passion with like good skills. And it's yeah. It's tricky. Because you have some people that you're competing against who are just more gifted towards it, right? Or just more headstrong, or they don't mind losing sleep where you're trying to do it sustainably. It's always a tricky balance. Yeah. You just have to be good at what you do. Other things come into play like connections, networking. Yeah, exactly. And just how nice of a person you are. I think this is like an understatement. Just like how nice you are. And how good you are working with other people. Super important skill. All right. We've been going for an hour and a half roughly. So, got any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And if not, I might be cutting this this one in like 5 to 10 minutes roughly, and then just switch it over, take like a little break, switch it over, and just do some personal work. Soft skills are important as fuck. Hey Raj, no streaming, like no swearing on the stream please. Jesus. It's true though. I think a lot of people underestimate that. Well, it's not underestimate, but it's they haven't focused or thought about that, because like their whole their whole 4 years of going through uni, right? They've been they've been so focused on all the technical aspects and getting their skills up to snuff and all that stuff, where yeah, they didn't really think about like all the soft skills yet. And that's also where your personality comes in, and where if you're better at making connections and better talking to people, and you're really good at listening, which is like a really big point too. It's not just about being good at talking, but being good at listening too. Super important. All right, this is awesome. I think this was the busiest stream yet. It was awesome, people. It was nice hanging out. But yeah, I think if we have no more questions, then I'm probably just gonna stop it here. It was nice hanging out with you all on this beautiful Sunday, and I hope to catch you in the next one. So thanks everyone for joining, and I'm just gonna drop some links, right? Like if you're interested in the community that we're building, or if you just want to check out my work, if you're curious about that too, just give me a follow on ArtStation, and reach out if you have any more questions. No worries. Thanks all for joining. This was awesome. It's nice hanging out with you all. Have a nice Sunday, everyone. Catch you in the next one. See ya.